I wonder, like, how scared do you guys get when you show up at church and you look at your bulletin and it says the youth pastor's preaching? I haven't done anything crazy yet, but maybe in the future. Today's going to be a fun day, though. And it marks the first sermon that I don't start with a story about Billy. So, yeah, the students are laughing at me. Even for them, that's crazy. No, I do have a story, though, about my dad. Some of you know him, or you've met him, and you know that he's a teacher, but, that's really recent. At one point, he wasn't a teacher. Most of my life, he was actually an airline pilot. And also on top of that, there was a time when he wasn't a pilot. He was, get this, full-time, he was a landlord. When I was really young, he had this idea. He bought a bunch of houses. I think he had 5 on top of the one that we lived in, and he would flip them like people do today, and then he would rent them out. And he still has a couple of them today, but I remember those times. I remember because I was young, and he used me, taught me a lot of things, and it's kind of funny to look back at it now because how naive was I? I was so young. He said, "Hey, Ryan, I have to redo the roof, but I will give you a penny for every nail that you find in the grass." And I'm thinking, great, money. That's awesome. And, I'd get $10 worth of nails. That's 1,000 nails. So I am stoked about $10. I got $10. What am I going to do with $10? That's a lot of candy. Meanwhile, I've spent every waking moment of 2 days looking for nails in the yard, and I've gotten $10 to show for it. But that's all right. As I grew older, the responsibilities I had would get heavier, or the teaching moments got a little more significant. And this is weird. One day, "Hey, Ryan, come here. I want to teach you about electrical." Okay, so he says, "Hey, okay, here you go. I'm going to teach you here," and I don't remember it very well, and you're about to find out why. He says, "Grab this wire, that's called the positive or the hot wire, and then I want you to grab this wire, that's the negative wire." So I step up on the chair, and I grab the first wire, and thinking, surely he turned the electricity off, and there's another step to this, I grab the second wire, to which started a chorus of me screaming and him laughing, and that's how I learned electrical work. And so he was a landlord for a really long time, and I still remember some of the tenants we had. We had really good ones, ones who stayed a long time, really appreciated his service. But of course, we also had really bad ones, where a few months after realizing he's not getting paid for rent, he shows up and the house is abandoned. And not the good kind of abandoned that you just turn it over and find a new person, but the bad kind of abandoned where I'm going to leave everything I don't want to pack or sell in a garage sale. Oh, also the floor's destroyed, and the refrigerator has more fungus than a mushroom farm. So we saw that quite often. In fact, I wanted to find a really funny story, so I went on Google and searched world's worst tenants. I did not realize this. That's a television show. Now, after watching just a little bit of it, I decided it's not for me. So note to everybody in here, I do not recommend this show. It's not family time, at the TV. Don't do that. I merely expressed the point to say there are some crazy tenants out there. Crazy people who rent houses, and it's all about that, just the strangest situations there. And I kind of want to get into this idea of the relationship between a landlord and a tenant. Now, as you can see on the screen, Pastor Bryce has given me the privilege to continue in this series that he's been doing, Circuitous No More, the series on Joshua. Now, I didn't realize when he gave me the passages what it was going to be. He says, the next section, the next couple of weeks, is chapters 13 through 21. That's 9 chapters, and last week, as we saw, he said, "I'm going to do chapter 13, verse 1. You can have the rest." Okay. So I've got verse 2 through the end of 21. Buckle your seatbelts. It's 11:01 right now, and we should be out of here, I don't know, at least it'll be afternoon. No, I'm kidding. It'll still be a.m., I hope. No, I do find it interesting, the passage that we have here. It's the division of the lands. All right? Now, there's not a lot there. Let me read you a section. This is kind of, you're going to feel the same way I felt. I start reading. I'm going to read out of chapter 15. This is pretty much every verse in 13 through 21. The allotment for the, you don't have to follow along. The allotment for the tribe of Judah, according to its clans, extended down to the territory of Edom, to the desert of Zin, in the extreme south. Their southern boundary started from the bay at this southern end of the Dead Sea, and it crossed south of Scorpion Pass, then it continued on to this, and then it went over that, and then it went around here, and then it went down there, and then the eastern boundary is this, and then the western boundary goes down here, and it curves westward over there, and then it goes down there, and that's the land. And it contains all these cities as well. And 63 verses later, now you can move on to chapter 16, which is the same thing. I've got 9 chapters of that. If you can make a devotional out of that, that's amazing. I have to make a sermon out of that. But, thank goodness God is faithful. I think there's actually something to this, and it's pretty cool, actually. I really like it. And the tough part about this is the image that you get. When I read this, I'm picturing, this is the 12 tribes of Israel sitting down and just dividing up the land they have. And I'm thinking, okay, that was weird. Hey. Anyone listening to this online is going to be kind of, what happened there? All right, where was I? Okay, so the image I got when reading this was the 12 guys just sitting around a big table with a map and Pastor Bryce's little green laser pointer and just pointing, all right, you guys go there. Judah, you can have that chunk over there. Well, wait a second, why does Judah get so much? Like, that's kind of the way it felt. But I think there's a lot more to this, and I think in order to get a better picture, we got to look back into the history, which Pastor Bryce has talked about a little bit, but we're going to have a little bit of fun with this. Let me paint you a different picture of the timeline that got us from way back in Genesis to Joshua 13, all right? This is going to take a few minutes, but it's going to be fun, all right? We're going to look all the way back to Genesis, starting with a guy named Abraham, okay? So here we go. Visualize this in your head with me. God says to Abraham, hey, Abraham, I want you to come outside. And when you get outside, I want you to count the stars, if you can, which you can't, but I want you to try. Because your children and descendants are going to be as numerous as the stars, and they're going to become a great nation, they're going to be my people, and it's going to start with you and your wife, Sarah. You're going to have children that result in a great nation. Sound like a plan? All right. Abraham goes to Sarah, hey, Sarah, we got to get going. Where are we going? I don't know, but God said there's going to be a large nation, and we're starting this nation, so we got to have a kid. Let's go. So, fast forward many decades, Abraham's 100 and something years old, Sarah's 90 something, and she's been completely barren. No kid, not one. And God comes to Sarah and says, hey, remember what I told you? You're going to have a son. She found that a little funny. So 9 months of giggles later, we've got Isaac. Now, I don't know what a 100-year-old excited man looks like, but he's a father with Sarah for the first time, and he's got this son that's going to create this amazing nation. I don't know what a 100-year-old man looks like doing the little heel click that I can't even do. I'm not even going to try it, and I'm 23. He's 100. So you can just kind of picture that. He's very excited about what's going on, and he's just thrilled about his son. And God comes to him and says, Abraham, I want to talk to you about Isaac. Yeah, Isaac, he's great. Thank you, God. He's an awesome son. Yeah, I want you to sacrifice him. Whoa, hold the phone. I'm supposed to have this great nation, and it's supposed to go through my children. This is Isaac. This is it. This is all Sarah and I have. So in Abraham's faithfulness, there's his and Sarah's only begotten son on the sacrificing table, or the altar. Do those words sound familiar, by the way? And it's their only son there, and with probably tears running down his face and in the backswing with the knife, God says, all right, you've been faithful. We'll save him. That's good. Fast forward more. Isaac, now he has his family. He has twins. So that's pretty cool. We've gone from Abraham and Sarah having one kid, and that kid having two. So you can see the multiplication. All right, it's working out, just like God said. He has two twins. Their names are what? Esau and Jacob. What happens here? Well, Esau technically has the birthright, but God promised Jacob the blessing. So Jacob later in life decides to take matters into his own hands. Not a good idea. Lies to his blind father. That's kind of weird. Gets the blessing that God had promised him. Not the best faithful way to do it, but that's how it works out. Jacob has this blessing that God had promised him, and now he's going to start his family. So he has this blessing, and he undergoes something so historical that to this day, you know about it. He undergoes a name change that's so important. His name goes from Jacob to a nation that we know of, Israel. So his name is now Israel. See how that works? We got 12 tribes of Israel. The nation Israel is still there, and Jacob, his name became Israel. He had what? 12 sons. Now you're seeing the connection. It's pretty cool. You got 12 sons, 12 tribes. They're named after these 12 sons. Now, these 12 sons, the 12 brothers, they also don't get along either. Jacob and Esau didn't get along. These 12, by the way, one son. That family has 2 sons. This family has 12 sons. They're getting this multiplication very well. It's going up exponentially here. Now, the 11 brothers are jealous of one other brother and his amazing, what? Technicolor dream coat. Yeah, Joseph. There. Maybe some of you didn't even realize that's in the Bible. It's pretty cool, right? You've seen the musical. Now you can read about it. If you haven't read about it, that's okay. I'm going to sum it up right here. 11 brothers hate Joseph and his amazing Technicolor dream coat. And they say, hey, let's kill him. Yeah, great idea. Whoa, wait. We're not cold-blooded murderers. All right. You're right. Let's just sell him to Egypt, split the money 11 ways. We'll take his coat, bloody it up, and tell him he got eaten by a wild animal. That's way not as bad as killing him, right? Okay. Bad luck for Joseph. Joseph finds himself in Egypt. Well, the tables are about to turn for him because in Egypt, the Pharaoh's nightmares are about to become his dream job. Pun intended, right? He interprets the dreams, and he does it so well, Pharaoh makes him really powerful in Egypt, and wouldn't you have it, the 11 brothers find themselves in Egypt later on in life saying, hey, we're here, you're really powerful here, and we're starving to death. Can you help us out? This guy says, yeah, I can help you and the whole family. Bring him on over. Oh, and by the way, you remember your brother who you sold into slavery in Egypt? That's me. Awkward. But it works out. The whole family moves to Egypt. And there we go. We got a reunion of the 12 brothers. And now in Egypt, new Pharaoh. New Pharaoh doesn't care about Joseph, doesn't care about them. And in fact, we went 1 son, 2 sons, 12 sons. Well, these 12 sons and their families are doing a fantastic job at being fruitful and multiplying. You did not have to ask them twice, God. And they are doing so well, Pharaoh's getting nervous. He's realizing how big this nation is getting and how fast they're doing it. In fact, the midwives come and say to him, hey, they're multiplying so fast, we can't keep up. They're so vigorous, we get there and the baby's already born. So they are multiplying so fast that he's really actually getting nervous that these people could take over Egypt. So what do? I don't know. Let's make them slaves. So we have the start of slavery in Egypt for the nation of Israel. And in fact, he's so scared, he tells them what? Hey, every baby boy that's born, throw him in the Nile and kill him. So we have this insane massacre. And what happens? One little Hebrew baby boy survives. All right, well, what harm is that going to do? We'll keep an eye on him. Well, this guy's name was Moses. Moses grows up, kills an Egyptian, decides maybe Egypt isn't the place for him after that, heads out, finds a wife, settles down, and what happens next? We've got the burning bush. He comes along, hey, there's a bush that's on fire, but it's not burning. I better take my shoes off. And then it starts talking to him, and it says, I am who I am. Also weird. But he gets the idea, this is God. And actually, in a moment of great reverence, he understands who he's talking to. And God says what? He says, I want you to go to Egypt, and I want you to get these people out. And so he goes back to Egypt, 10 plagues, and let my people goes later. They find themselves wandering. By the way, that last plague, the death of the firstborn Egyptian sons, kind of similar to the thing that Moses had survived, right? So there they are. They're going. They come to this big Red Sea. They need to get across it. He puts his staff in the water. God splits the Red Sea. How amazing. The entire nation of Israel, God frees them from Egypt, sends them across the Red Sea. What should we do? I don't know. Let's build a golden calf. Wrong. Now they've got 40 years in the desert. Now we're getting up to the point where Pastor Bryce has taken us through. They've got 40 years in the desert. What happens in that time? Moses dies. All right. New guy steps up to the plate. Who is it? We got Joshua. And now we're into the book of Joshua. And what does he do? Come on, we know this. Well, some of you know the song. Maybe not the students. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho and a whole bunch of other places. And they find themselves at Joshua chapter 13. There's your timeline from Abraham counting stars to Joshua 13. And now 13 through 21 suddenly has a lot more significance. They're not just moving and, you guys live here, you guys live next door, and you guys live next door. No, this is something that they've been looking to for how long? I did the timeline, but I didn't do the math. It's been a lot of years. It's so significant to them. Yet somehow we can't capture it in just those chapters. You look at the whole history, though, they finally made it to what God promised them, this promised land, a promised nation, that we are God's people, and we finally made it here. This is the day we've been looking for. This is the thing this is what has been giving us hope through everything, is God's promise. And what's interesting is there they are, yet here we are in Wellsburg, West Virginia, and maybe you're not amazed by that. It's just been a great history lesson, but I want to convince you that you and your chair in Wellsburg, West Virginia were part of this plan that God had laid out for the nation of Israel. And you're not sitting in Israel. You're not part of the 12 tribes. That's okay. If you'll follow along with me, I want to show you that you were a part of this plan because God's plan was so much bigger than just a plot of land. Now you can follow along on the screen. I'm going to read a couple verses out of this that will make a little bit more sense than just the territories. In 13, verse 6, we have, "As for the inhabitants of the mountain regions from Lebanon to Mizraphoth-Maim," that is all the Sidonians, this is God talking, "I myself will drive them out before the Israelites. Be sure to allocate this land to Israel for an inheritance as I have instructed you." That's one section. You move on to 14, the first couple verses in 14. It says, "Now these are the areas the Israelites received as an inheritance in the land of Canaan, which Eleazar the priest, Joshua son of Nun, and the heads of the tribal clans of Israel allotted to them. Their inheritances were assigned by lot to the 9.5 tribes, as the Lord commanded through Moses." And the last verse, and still in 14, is verse 13. "Then Joshua blessed Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as his inheritance." Do you capture the common theme? The word inheritance. You know how many times the word inheritance comes up in chapters 13 through 21? Somewhere around 50, give or take. It was tough to count, but it is in there a lot. It is an inheritance. Now, as we've gone through, I've kind of had the image of war. They go, they fight, they take over. But really, that's not the way God talks about this land. They didn't conquer the land to take it for themselves. They didn't buy the land. This was an inheritance given by God. In fact, this won't be on the screen, but Leviticus 25 says, "The land must not be sold permanently because the land is mine." Can't sell what's not yours, right? "And you are but aliens and my tenants." They received this land from God. It was given to them, and it was always in God's plan to do so. It was handed to them as an inheritance for them. And what was it? It wasn't about a land. God didn't give it to them because he thought it'd be good for farming or good for the sheep. This land was given to them because God had promised it to them, because it was a safe haven. It represented the place where God was going to be. It represented where God was going to protect them. It represented redemption, or represented what we might call salvation. Now, the interesting thing about this is, today God doesn't want to give me a plot of land, but I know that I've been given a gift that was part of the plan of God in salvation, because if you continue the timeline past Joshua, what happens? You go through the lineage of Israel, and you can move on all the way down to King David, who wrote the Psalms, and then that goes down to a guy named Joseph, again, different Joseph, but this Joseph, who's to be married to a woman named Mary, and though she was still a virgin, she gave birth to a son named Jesus Christ, who was part of this entire plan. And what happens? He takes his life and gives it. He's the Son of God, and he puts himself up on the cross for an inheritance that we can receive. The inheritance is no longer a plot of land. The inheritance is still redemption, protection. It is salvation. Now, what's interesting here is sometimes we have a hard time accepting gifts, don't we? It's even harder to accept a gift from God sometimes. this idea of salvation, I want to convince you, is so important. It's just as important to these as these Israelites were looking at this promised land, because it is the promise of God. It is the promise that you live a life that needs redemption, that needs salvation. And what's interesting is I think we as humans, we know it. Like, we know we need this, but we have a hard time accepting it. But it's there. It's there for the taking. It's a gift. It was not, it's not there's no price on it. During this time, there was also this thing called the Palestinian Covenant. Is laws that they were expected to obey and follow, but that had nothing to do with the land. They were being given the land, and then this was another side thing, that God still expected obedience. As we accept salvation, we know that faithfulness to God is expected, and the love of God is expected, but at the same time, salvation is being given to us, redemption and hope in a life. The love of God is there, and the faithfulness is there, and there's nothing that can stop it. Because you see, these guys made it to the promised land, and what? It wasn't going to be stopped. It wasn't going to be stopped by a barren woman. It wasn't going to be stopped by old age. It certainly wasn't going to be stopped by 2 brothers' jealousy, and it wasn't going to be stopped by 11 brothers of jealousy. And it wasn't going to be stopped by birthrights or stolen blessings. It wasn't going to be stopped by one man in slavery. It wasn't going to be stopped by 1,000 or 1,000,000 people in slavery in Egypt. It couldn't be stopped by Pharaoh or his army or 10 plagues. Well, the plagues were on Egypt, but it could not be stopped by the army again. And then it continues on. It cannot be stopped by a golden calf. And it just keeps going. It couldn't get stopped by 40 years in the desert. And it certainly wasn't going to be stopped in front of Joshua with all these towns that he conquered, starting with the big ones such as Jericho. Nothing could stop it, because this is God's plan. He had laid this out. He had ordained this from the moment Abraham decided to try to count the stars for hours and hours, just to make a point that this is what's going to happen. The plan of God was not shakable. You could not stop this. You could not stop salvation that was coming for us. And today, you cannot stop salvation from being given. All you've got to do is take it. There's nothing there to take it away from you. And what's cool about this, God being their landlord, God wants to be the landlord of your heart, of your soul. And all you've got to do is accept that. Why? Why should you? Because with this landlord, there is no security deposit. Christ got up on that cross and paid every dime of what I would have to give, taking the death that I know I deserve. There's no credit check. You don't need to be at a credit of 1,000 with God. In fact, I think it was Pastor Bryce that said, being a sinner is kind of like a prerequisite to salvation. If you're not a sinner, you don't need to be saved. There's no background check. Me, at one point, I was a sinner, and I decided I'm going to accept the salvation of God, the salvation of Christ, to be redeemed, the gift of heaven and a relationship with God. That makes me no different than anyone in this room. All that is one decision. Some of you have made that decision for Christ, and you're here to worship Him. And it still applies here, because we're still in a landlord-tenant relationship between your heart and Him. And today, some of us, so often we get into routine of life, and we forget exactly who gave us the salvation. We forget the faithfulness that we can give out. And you have the opportunity to give everything in your life to God. It's still there. This land, it represents so much more. These 9 chapters are more than just a division of places to live. It was a moment where God's plan came to fulfillment, and it reflects what's coming for you. And you can make that choice today. And it's funny, is it our faithfulness to God is mirrored by His faithfulness to us? I don't think so, because God's always faithful, and that gift of salvation is always there for you. And for those of you who are wondering how this applies, if you've been a believer, here's how it applies. Our faithfulness is to be a reflection of His, and that can grow every day, because you're never to the top of that until the day you look Him in the face, which won't be here on earth. And so today you have that opportunity to grow your relationship deeper with God. You see, there is no better landlord than God. Becca and I, we've got pretty good landlords. But they don't beat God. And though God's not asking for your house, He's not asking for rent, He's asking for your heart. He's asking for love and a relationship with him. He's trying to convince you that there's so much more to life than what's here, than what this earth can present to you. There's a plan that he's laid out for you and your heart, and it is salvation, and it is not stoppable. It's not stoppable by your sins, the things you've done, the things you're going through. God is always there. So I want to pray. I want to give an opportunity to pray for both. If you've never made a decision for Christ, I want to tell you that's okay. I'm going to give you an opportunity. You can just pray with me in a moment. I'm also going to pray if you have made a decision for Christ. I'm still going to let out a prayer for that, about our relationship with God. And I promised you we'd get out in the AM. We're going to do that. The praise team's going to come up. I'm going to pray, and then they're going to continue to lead us in worship. I'm not giving an altar call per se. I'm giving an invitation where you get to stay in your seat. But then after I pray, as they sing, I'll be down here. And if you want prayer for anything specific, I'll be down there. If any of the leaders of the church want to join me up here to also pray for people, that'd be great. And I think God has an amazing opportunity for so many people here in this church, here and now. So will you join me in prayer? And if you don't know how to pray that, if you're thinking, that is something I want to be a part of what God's doing, I want to be a part of God's plan, and I see now that salvation is something for me, but you don't know how to pray that, that's okay. Just follow along. I'm gonna do that. I've done it before, and it changed my life, and I didn't do it alone. I followed along with somebody, and you're welcome to do that, and I believe it'll change your life. And then I'm going to pray just for the relationships that are in here between us and Christ as well. So figuratively, come to the altar with me. I think God is here. If you want to come to the altar, it is here. I'm not going to stop you, but you don't have to. And I believe God wants to join you right there in your seat right now. And so let me pray.